is great.
Our God is awesome.
Celebrate.
Celebrate.
Our God is great.
Our God is awesome.
Celebrate.
Celebrate.
He's an awesome God, bigger than my wildest dreams, monumental love, eternal hope for you and me. 'Cause he's an awesome God, bigger than my wildest dreams, monumental love, eternal hope for you and me. 'Cause he's an awesome God. Our God's an awesome God. Our God's an awesome God.
Welcome back, everyone. I have some great news for you. Even when we're afraid, we can push through and stand up to our fears. That's why this month we will be learning about courage. Courage is being brave enough to do what you should do, even when you're afraid. In other words, courage doesn't mean that you're not afraid. It just means that you do what you should, even if you are afraid. We can have courage because we know that we are not facing our fears alone. God is with us, and we know that we can trust God no matter what. I have a new memory verse for us this month, and it's one of my favorite encouragements from the Bible. It's found in Joshua 1:9. Now don't be afraid of how long it is. We'll take it piece by piece. But why do we do memory verses anyways? Well, it's so we can remember what God says, no matter what life throws at us. Even if you don't have a Bible in your backpack to check it right away, you'll have it up here. Now, I'm going to read us the whole verse, then we'll break it into two pieces to do actions. Ready? Be strong and brave. Do not be afraid. Do not lose hope. I am the Lord your God. I will be with you everywhere you go. Okay, let's put some actions to the first part. Be strong and brave. Two sets of muscles. So be strong and brave. Do not be afraid. Let's get your hands up there like your teeth are chattering because you're so nervous. Do not be afraid. Do not lose hope. Oh, are you feeling faint with hopelessness? Do not lose hope. Okay, let's put that all together. Be strong and brave. Do not be afraid. Do not lose hope. Awesome. On to part 2. I, point to heaven, am the Lord. So you're going to make an L and pull it shoulder to hip. So I am the Lord, your God. So the same way as lots of our action songs. Okay? I am the Lord, your God. I, point back to heaven, will be with you. Give yourself a big hug. Everywhere you go. Put some disco finger points there. Everywhere you go. Let's put that part 2 together. I am the Lord, your God. I will be with you everywhere you go. And that's found in Joshua 1:9. Okay, let's put all of it together. Part 1, part 2, and where it's found. Be strong and brave. Do not be afraid. Do not lose hope. I am the Lord, your God. I will be with you everywhere you go. Joshua 1:9. Great job, everyone.
Everywhere I go on this road, high and low, where I go with you. So I won't be afraid, this my hope, come what may. Where I go with my soul. Your kingdom is my home, and I don't walk alone. Everywhere I go on this road, high and low, where I go with you. So I won't be afraid, this my home, come what may. Where I go with you. Hey! Everywhere I go on this road, high and low, where I go with you. So I won't be afraid, this my home, come what may. Where I go with you. Where I go with you. Where I go with you.
We've been making our way through God's big story in the Bible. Today's lesson comes from the fourth book of the Old Testament, Numbers. Let's look back at where we've been so far. God promised to bless the whole world through Abraham's family, the Israelites. God rescued the Israelites from being enslaved in Egypt by leading them through the Red Sea. In the desert, God showed deep love by providing the people with what they needed along the way. God also gave them rules to show them how to love God and love others. About 2 years after the Israelites had crossed the Red Sea, they finally made it to the very edge of Canaan, the Promised Land. God told Moses to send men to check out the land before the rest of the Israelites entered. Check it out. The Lord said to Moses, "Send some men to check out the land of Canaan. I am giving it to the Israelites. Send one leader from each of Israel's tribes." Once Moses had chosen all 12 men, he laid out a super secret spy mission for them. Moses told the men that he wanted them to go into Canaan and see what it was like. Were there a lot of people, and were they strong? How well protected were their towns? Did they have high walls? And what about the land? Was the soil good? Were there a lot of trees? Moses also asked the men to bring back some of the food that was growing there. So these 12 men snuck into Canaan, just as God had instructed. For about 6 weeks, the men traveled the length of the country. They saw the places where Abraham and his family had lived hundreds of years before. On their return journey, the spies cut a bunch of grapes so massive that it had to be carried on a pole between 2 men. You can bet that when these 12 men showed up in the Israelite camp after 40 long days, people couldn't wait to hear what they had to say. The 12 spies stood before Moses and the Israelites carrying the massive fruit they had brought. At first, they gave a glowing report about what they had seen. They said the land was filled with so many good things, it was practically flowing with milk and honey. They had the massive grapes for proof. But the spies said that the people who lived in the land were powerful, and their cities had high walls. There were 2 of the spies who were courageous and weren't afraid to do what God had asked them to do. Their names were Joshua and Caleb. Caleb spoke up. He said, "We should go up and take the land. We can certainly do it." But the other spies disagreed. They said, "We can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are." Those other spies went and spread a bad report about the land among the Israelites, which caused everyone to panic. The people said it would be better if they went back to slavery in Egypt instead of going into this land that God had promised them. Joshua and Caleb then spoke to the crowd to encourage them not to be afraid. Here's what they said. "We passed through the land and checked it out. It is very good. If the Lord is pleased with us, He'll lead us into that land. It's a land that has plenty of milk and honey. He'll give it to us. But don't refuse to obey Him, and don't be afraid of the people of the land." But the people wouldn't listen to Joshua and Caleb. In the midst of all the chaos, the glory of God appeared at the tent of meeting. God spoke to Moses and said, "How long will these people not respect me? How long will they refuse to believe in me?" But Moses begged God to have mercy on the Israelites. God agreed to forgive the people, but it wasn't all good news. God said that none of the Israelites who were there that day would get to enter the land of Canaan, except for Joshua and Caleb. The Israelites had to wander through the wilderness for almost 40 years. By that time, only Joshua and Caleb were still living to lead the new generation, their children, into Canaan. At the end of 40 years of wandering in the desert, Joshua led the Israelites into the promised land. Right away, they came up to the walled city of Jericho. But with God's help, they faced their fears, and those impossibly strong city walls came tumbling down. If you think about it, Joshua and Caleb had to make a choice to do the right thing, even when everyone else was giving in to fear. They knew that God had promised to give them the land, and that's why they had courage. That's why they were able to stand tall, even when the others were afraid. With God's help, you can have that kind of courage too. You can do what you should, even when others are afraid. Our memory verse, Joshua 1:9, is what God said to Joshua when Joshua was about to lead God's people into the promised land. This was after the people had been traveling for 40 long years in the wilderness. God told Joshua, "Be strong and brave. Don't be afraid. Don't lose hope. I am the Lord your God. I will be with you everywhere you go." That is good for us to remember too. We can have courage because we know that God is with us. We can stand up and do what we should because we don't have to face our fears alone. I can understand why the Israelites were scared to enter the land of Canaan. I mean, their enemies were really strong. But there's a difference in the way Joshua and Caleb saw the situation. You see, Joshua and Caleb trusted God. They knew that God had already promised to help them. And because they were courageous, in the end, they were able to enter the land that God had set aside for them. Here's what we need to remember today. You can do what you should, even when others are afraid. Say that with me. You can do what you should, even when others are afraid. Now, that doesn't mean you won't feel afraid, but when you believe in Jesus and choose to follow him, you have God's Holy Spirit living inside of you. So even in those times when you are afraid, God's Spirit can help you be brave and do the right thing. There are so many times when we have to put courage into practice in our lives. And it's especially tough when we feel like we're the only ones. So let's head up to small group and talk about that some more. Have a great week.